So we have Satsuki Ina, who was born in the Tule Lake Segregation Center. She is co-founder of Tsudu for Solidarity, a nonviolent direct action project, as you all know. And she has been working to support frontline immigration and refugee communities from being targeted by ICE and racist, inhumane policies. She's a psychotherapist specializing in as a community trauma consultant. She's an author, a filmmaker, and with Mike Ishii founded Tsudu for Solidarity. Mike, on the right here, co-chaired the New York Day of Remembrance Committee and the New York Japanese American Oral History Project. He sits on the commission of the Hudson Valley Park of Study and Reflection and has served on advisory boards. And these are both people we all know and love and are going to be talking to us about repair.
Thank you. Thank you, Nancy. We just want to also say thank you, Chizu, for the invitation to speak today. And thank you to JAMP for hosting this event. So we wanted to start by just grounding together. So take a deep breath in. Nice deep breath at your own pace. And as you breathe in, if you feel comfortable, close your eyes. And notice yourself. And how do you feel in this moment? And just continue to breathe in deeply and exhale at your own pace. How are you doing? There's a lot of really wonderful things that have been shared in this weekend. Lots of processing for us to catch up on. But we just wanted to slow down for a minute and just take stock of all that we've had a chance to integrate here, and for you to notice, how are you doing right now? Maybe take one breath in and send it all the way down through your torso, down and out with your exhale, and breathe in. And send your breath down through your legs, down through the bottoms of your feet into the ground. And breathe in and draw the chi from heaven down through the top of you and all the way down through you and down into the ground and through that cycle. And then send that breath as you exhale out to all of the people at your table, and breathe in and out and send that to them. The nourishing breath of life. And then expand beyond that as you breathe out and send it to every person in this room. And another nice breath in and send it out to every person in Oakland. And continue breathing. And when you're ready, just bring your attention inside of yourself and you can breathe normal. And just sit quietly. And from here, find your luminous center, which is in your heart, right in the center of your chest. Find that place of your light. And as you exhale, send that force of transformation out everywhere into the world, in all directions. Just think of ourselves as a center of radiance in this place together, and we're sending this out to the world right now. The world needs this right now. As we consider the journey of repair for ourselves, for our families, for one another, we can also connect to this larger understanding that we're also trying to repair all of the hurt and pain that exists right now in this world. And we're sending our love out to anyone who's suffering right now from state violence. All the people in this city and elsewhere who are living in fear right now. Our friends who have been abducted, our friends who are incarcerated, our friends who have been deported, our friends all around the world right now fighting for survival. And we're sending and asking out into the world for an end to the violence. Beginning here, a healing for ourselves. I'm going to pass now to Satsuki to share.
When we were talking about how we would share our vision of repair for our community, ongoing repair, because this gathering is an experience of repair. We are talking to each other in ways that it has actually taken decades for us. Leaders have emerged, stories have been uncovered, and we know so much more about our history now than we have before. And for somebody like Chizu, who happens to be 94 years old, 95, oops, sorry, 95 years old, not just to be the inspiration for this gathering, but to be the lead, the creative source. She was able to call together this community to be together, to share all that we've learned, the energy that is around our own healing and repair, and the effort that is being made to support and heal and repair where there's fracture all over this world. And so rather than a lecture, Mike and I decided we would have a conversation, and at some point we will include all of you participants to join us in this conversation. And I'm reminded, I think it was 2018, I'm not sure, around there.
Yeah.
Where this was after it was 2018, it was after the Tule Lake pilgrimage, where Mike instigated a gathering protest at Tule Lake, protesting the removal of children, the separation of children from their families by the administration at that time. And many of us who were children of the camps in Tule Lake recognized the story that was a repetition of our own experience. And so that's when I met Mike. And I don't know, maybe a few weeks or sometime later, we decided to have a conversation. And we met in San Francisco. We didn't know where we were going to have this conversation, but we ended up in some coffee shop and said, you know, we need to gather our people. We need to say something, do something about the fact that what happened to us was happening again. And then we said, oh, I think we need a budget. I said, yeah, maybe. You think we could ask for $100 for X, Y, and Z? And it was like, we had no idea how we were going to make this dream a reality. Because we were both really clear that in our standing up for those who are being targeted today was going to be a part of our own healing in ways that people did not stand up for us as we disappeared from our jobs and schools and farms and homes. We felt like it was really important for us to show up, to work in collaboration and in solidarity with other organizations to fight back oppression and state violence. So we felt like it was time to have another conversation.
Can I share about that? So that was the conversation we had before we went to Fort Sill, Oklahoma, where the Trump administration was planning to incarcerate 1,600 unaccompanied migrant children from the border. And Detention Watch Network had offered us a small grant to gather a group, along with Nancy Ukai, the other third co-founder of SUDU. And so this was the first conversation we were having about how do we do this, right? And we end up taking 20 people from all over the Japanese American community, converging on Oklahoma, building solidarity with indigenous leaders, AIM Indian Territory, Black Lives Matters Oklahoma City, Detention Watch, United We Dream affiliates there, DACA young folks. And we formed this coalition and we stopped them, right? But what's remarkable, and the backstory here that I think is important for this conversation is that I live in New York, you live here, so we're from across the country from each other. You're from a Tule Lake family of resistors and renunciants, and I'm from a family that, my grandfather's Jimmy Sakamoto. He's one of the founders of the Japanese American Citizens League. And so yesterday when I'm standing in front, I'm thinking about this, that we're gonna talk about this today, which is, if you follow the narrative of the fractures that happened in our community, we're not supposed to be friends. And we're best friends. We are, really. I would take a bullet for you.
You're one of two of my best friends.
Oh, come on. All right. But there's a template that we've, you know, how do you have this conversation? We've had this conversation about 100,000 times together, but the thing is that repair for us is very personal. And we didn't set out to do that. We just liked each other tremendously. I've always admired you long before I knew you, and it was because you cared about people. And you decided to stand with the person who no one else is going to stand with. And I was like, that's the person I want to be with. And so we started forming this relationship based on the work that becomes SUDU for Solidarity, but it's about healing, really. I think that was in the first sentence that we talked about with each other, is about healing. And I feel like that's been the continued conversation ever since. And we come from these very different historical backgrounds from the community. I don't know, should we talk about that a little bit? You want to go?
I was born in Tule Lake, which was the maximum security prison, after my parents answered no to the forced loyalty question. And eventually my parents were compelled to renounce their American citizenship. And so they were the so-called bad boys, the troublemakers. And over time, through research and talking to families and other people and discovering the letters my parents wrote to each other while they were separated in 2 different prison camps, I realized that the narrative that had been written about my parents was a government narrative trying to justify their persecution and their removal. And, that made me mad. I felt like it took a lifetime to uncover the truth of their courage, their belief in their constitutional rights, and their right to protest. And so my father was a Kibe, and he, in his early entry in his diary before he was removed, he went to a JCL meeting, and there was a component with the JCL for Kibes. And in the diary entry, he says he's going to a Kibe meeting, and this is after Pearl Harbor had been bombed, and there was this community gathering that was going on. And at the end of the diary entry, he said, I'm not going back to the JCL. And so I think that was the first time that I realized that there was some kind of breach in the relationship, and that he had decided that the JCL was not the place where he was going to get any support or help.
So,
Mr. JCL, go ahead. Your turn.
thanks, Tule Lake. So I'm Yonsei, grew up in SeaTac, which is the suburb of Seattle. I grew up in a very white, very racist white working class neighborhood. They shot our windows with BB guns. So there were always holes in the windows because my mother could not afford to keep repairing the windows. So there were holes in the windows. They spray painted "Kill the Japs." They waited for my father to leave for work every day, and then they would call my mom and say, "Jap bitch, we know he left. We're gonna come murder you now." So that's the neighborhood I grew up in. And the reason for that is because my mother didn't raise us in the Japanese American community on purpose. And so I had to find my way back there. And it's because she was too traumatized from her experience of growing up as the daughter of James Sakamoto. And I did not understand this as a child. All I saw was her fear and her reticence to be around our people. And I longed for connection growing up in a very white, racist neighborhood. And so it took me a long time to find my way back into community and to understand also what the role of JCL was, because I only heard it through what my family was talking about around the dinner table, right? And there was an incredibly defensive stance about my grandfather, and I did not understand that because I never knew him. He died many, many, many years before I was born. He was struck down by a car and killed. And so finding my way back to a relationship also meant that I had to grapple with why my mother couldn't stay. And so I'll just share quickly, and then I'm really curious to also know more about how this was for you growing up. Shizu shared a story with me that she shared yesterday, which was that in Camp Harmony, Puyallup, there were people who wanted to murder my grandfather. She talked about it yesterday. And I'd never heard that from my own family. It took Chizu, my friend Chizu, to tell me that after, she only told me that last year. But it was what I always sensed. And so there's been a process for me, even today, of trying to reconcile and understand as a descendant of a JCL founding leader, how do I grapple with this relationship and this history. And the first time I really understood the limb report, I felt like I wanted to die. Because I felt responsible for every person whose family member was taken away by the FBI. But the story doesn't end there, because its story continues here, which is we all deserve unmerited grace. And the perpetrator in this story ultimately is the state, who set people up to do horrible things and damaged us and hurt us in horrible ways. And who here doesn't regret hurting somebody? And so as a community, and I understood this finally for myself, it's like as a young Japanese boy who experienced multi-generational trauma, how am I going to find my way forward and find my way back to my own people? And it has to be through loving yourself, right? And so that's why this friendship has been so important to me, because Satsuki has been the friend I searched for my whole life, who accepts me and understands my whole story, and I've told her everything. But that's just a little bit more about my relationship. I think it's kind of important in telling this story about how people from either side of this equation find their way to a process of repair. It's as sort of an example. Thank you.
It's one of the things I love about Mike is that he is present, authentic, and the idea that we have been pitted against each other is has been very powerful, because the divide in our community around this whole issue of who was loyal and who was not. You know, it started more than 80 years ago, and we're still not able to come to a place where we can repair that injury. And so we thought it would be helpful to share our personal stories, because it helped us distill how do we undo what was done to us. We've all been victims, generations of victims. And we came to this conclusion that a JACL resolution of apology is, we've been kind of banging our heads against it, for it, back and forth. And some people will talk about the 2019 gathering and have different interpretations of it. But what we realize is that it's the wrong path. A resolution is two organizations hoping to get more votes than each other to make history right somehow. It's not really how it works. We both decided that there has to be an alternative way for us to be back as a whole community, to repair the fracture, the kintsugi, that will tell our history, but also make our community greater than it ever has been, because we've reclaimed our need to be together, to work in solidarity, to have empathy and compassion for one another, rather than trying to hold on to a narrative that was imposed on us.
Yeah, so the image and the view is forward, not backwards. If we are wed to the narratives, and we know there were a lot of false pieces in that narrative, and it was, as you said, imposed upon us, if we're wed to the past that way, we can't see each other in the moment right now. And so a resolution is almost like signing a contract. I agree now to accept you as a human being. And I think within that is a confusion about being a human being. We've always been human beings. Who dehumanized us? The narrative, the false narrative, the false racist narrative of this government that imposed this on us. And so how do we repair? We have to find each other again. You know, I was talking to some Sudu younger folks who, you know, grew up, their families were displaced away from the West Coast. They never have known a Japanese American community. All of them, actually, are multiracial. And they were asking me about model minority. How do we deconstruct, decolonize from model minority myth? And they feel really bad about it because, understandably, we've been used as wedges against the black community, against other communities, and dangled a carrot saying, if you'll play this role, we're going to give you a little more. And of course, we know they'll throw you under the bus in a hot second, and they have. But we've been manipulated into that position, right? And people feel really bad about that and really mad at our own people about it. And I shared something. I said, you know, yeah, we need to change that for sure. But let's remember that it's not just about stopping doing that. It's what are we asking or offering instead of that for our own people? And in one swoop, we lost our farms and our communities. We lost our nihon machis. We lost our jobs. And we lost our language. The most important thing, though, is we lost each other. We were stolen from each other and then pitted against each other. Dylan Myers claimed one of his greatest victories was the forced assimilation of our people. And they didn't let everyone come back right away. And so we need to have a very tender heart towards ourselves while we try to find our way back to each other, right? And so that's why I like to quote Brian Stevenson, the amazing leader, who talks about unmerited grace, that everyone deserves unmerited grace. And he says, no one, this is a man who defends people on death row, right? And he says, no one is the sum of their worst days. No one. And so I think I look to him a lot as a resource. And I think, what would Brian say right now? What would he say to our people, right? And I think he would say, start from a place of reaching for each other again. And that's not without telling the truth. We got to tell the truth too, right?
And telling the truth is really to understand how we got to this moment. So the heart of the issue was the US government was running out of money, housing 125,000 and more people. They were running out of soldiers to fight in Europe. They were feeling the hot breath of the ACLU, who was starting to question whether this whole thing was even constitutional. And so they hit on this idea that we have to start sending some of these people back. We can't continue to support them. But how can we do that when we have criminalized them and convinced the rest of the country that they're a risk to national security, that we have to get rid of them, that we have, that anyone who has the face of the enemy is assumed to be guilty of sabotage and treason and whatever else. So they constructed this artificial moral standard that said, if you answered the question this way, and said, yes, yes, you will bear arms to fight for your country, that you will disavow your loyalty to the emperor, then if you answered yes to that, then you were loyal. Two simple questions that would separate and distinguish you from those that said no. And people had to decide under this forced, artificial moral standard, and they had to guess what the future was going to mean if you answered yes or if you answered no. If you answered yes, you could be forced to be a soldier fighting for democracy while your parents were left behind barbed wires. If you said no, you could be deported back to a war-torn country with people who really didn't want Japanese Americans on their soil. And so in a situation of mass confinement, there's a psychology that happens that makes us really vulnerable to being divided, to create chaos and confusion. And so that's the source of the legacy, starting from the beginning, from when Pearl Harbor was bombed and people were trying to line up to figure out how they're going to survive. And some people had decisions and made choices that were different from one another. There was never an issue of loyalty in the Japanese American community. That was proven by naval intelligence, even by the FBI. And it was never an issue that ever went to court or actually criminalizing anybody that was working for the Japanese government. So all of that is the mythology under which our fracture has given birth and has flourished. And we realized that in our friendship, that we had to rise above that. We had to really look and see what happened and reclaim the most important part of our future is to be with each other. There are bigger battles out in the world that need us to be united so that we have a voice that will make a difference, not just in J-Town, but throughout the country and maybe even in the world. We have a story to share together, and we'll be stronger and more powerful when these false divides that have been forced us to look at each other as either wrong or right is repaired.
Yeah, and I want to just return to, something that Satsuki said at the first repair conference, Kintsugi, that Sudo held in Little Tokyo last fall. And she opened the entire symposium by saying, in order to heal community trauma, we must start by telling the truth. That's hard for us. We don't like conflict culturally. We avoid it, and saving face is really important in our culture. So this idea, also of living with shame is really hard for us. And we were shamed. We were shamed badly in this whole experience. And so I catch myself in this spot a lot, which is defending myself. Sometimes I lie even, so that I don't have to feel that bad. And so there's this interesting thing about our friendship. I know she comes from a family, she was born in the concentration camp, and I know the story of what her family went through. And so if I'm going to be true in my friendship with her, then for me, I have to know the real history about what happened. I think that a lot of folks from JCL families don't know the full history. And it's time for us to know that. And it's not the responsibility of people who were renunciants or their descendants or resistors. It's actually ours. That's our work. And why would you want anyone else to tell you that anyway? It's ours because that's freedom for us. That's true freedom for us, to really understand what happened. Because I'll tell you something, as I'm starting to understand that story better, I'm actually getting more of my grandfather. I don't agree with the choices he made, but I'm starting to understand maybe why he made those choices, what led to that. And that's giving me a deeper insight into us as a group. But I want that for me. And it's starting to repair me and how I feel about myself in the world. It's like we all end up kind of feeling bad in these places where you know, we're all trying our best all the time, and we fall down and we fail. And we haven't always had people to show us, well, no, this is how you can get up, and I'm going to help you, and I'm going to help you walk the right path instead of the avoidance path. We haven't had very much help to do that. And we also got, excuse my language, the shit kicked out of us. So this is our chance to kind of do that. And so as a JCL descendant, that's what I want to do. I'm actually really excited about that. I wasn't always. But I'm starting to think, hey, I think that's the open future. That's the path. It lies with truth and understanding. And from that place comes compassion.
So when I was a kid in high school a few years ago, I was recruited by a JCL representative. They came to our high school to get us to be part of the junior JCL in San Francisco. And so I joined the junior JCL. I have been a member ever since. Not of the junior, but I graduated to the JCL. So I was to give an oratorical speech and about loyalty. And I heard my mother and father, as my mother was explaining to my father that I was a member now of the junior JCL, and that I was going to give a speech about loyalty. And all of a sudden I heard my father at the top of his voice say, "I hate the JACL. She will not be a member of the JACL." And that was the first time I realized that there was this really strong feeling, probably not just in my family, but other families who had renounced, who had been no-nos. I remember, because my mother usually quietly won the disagreements, I was to give my oratorical speech at this place, and I could see in the back of the audience my mother and father sitting together. And I didn't give a very good speech, but I could see how proud my father was, how hard it must have been for him to even be there, but how proud he was that I had a place to speak. And so, you know, what we want to do in our conversation today is talk about what we feel might be a better route to our repair. So I have one more story as we get ready to offer you a discussion point about how we think we need to move forward. I made a film called Children of the Camps, and I had never made a film before. I didn't ever see myself as a filmmaker, but I had been doing these Children of the Camps groups for people who wanted to get together and kind of unravel their stories because their parents hadn't talked about it. And these were all people who were my age who were children inside of the prison camps. And my first thought was, okay, we're going to make this film because we could use it to get other people to understand how it helps to talk about what happened. And there are going to be no white people in the room. And what was I thinking? I didn't know any Japanese-American filmmakers. I was just, had this idea. And so it turned out that the videographer, the director, the sound guy, they were all white. And I said, okay, well then they have to stay in a separate building and only show up when we're filming. And we had we're sitting together in a circle, and you know, the goal was to get them to talk about their stories and the impact that it had on them. So we could share that with other people, and there could be opportunities for people to respond to this film and see the healing that comes from people sharing their stories with each other and listening with empathy. So the first moment in the gathering, Bessie Masuda was sharing her story about her father being taken away from the family and separated. And she read the letter that she wrote as a child to the President of the United States begging, because her mother was ill, and could her father please come back, not home, but back to the prison camp where the rest of the family was. And we were kind of frozen listening to the story, and over to the side, I heard this kind of sniffling, and I looked over, and there was Steve Holsapple holding the giant camera that we used to use. And he was crying. He was still trying to film, but tears were streaming down his face, and snot was running down his face. And so I said, we need to stop filming. And I said, Steve, are you okay? And he said, no, I'm not okay. And he was sobbing. And he said, I've never heard this story before. And I am ashamed that I didn't know what happened to your people. And my heart is aching for what that must have been like for your families. And so I asked him, okay, put the camera down, come inside the circle. So I had him sit in the circle. And all he could do was cry. And pretty soon all of us were crying together. And I realized in that moment that it was a big mistake to fracture this project that was supposed to be about healing. Because I realized that having the presence of a compassionate witness, somebody who had a totally different experience, letting himself care, letting himself really hear what the other person's experience was like, maybe even why decisions and choices were made different from anything he might have made. And from that experience, I learned that when we listen to each other's stories with compassion, those choices and actions could have been mine. And his presence as a person with empathy, really listening for the other person's experience, changed him and changed the dynamic in the group, and that's what made it possible for this film to invite these people who were strangers to each other to suddenly feel so much closeness and openness with each other. It's powerful. So what we're proposing,
I sort of framed this very, very briefly yesterday, so let's return to it, which is we're proposing process. It's yet to be determined. And I will say again, a community that was robbed of its agency about its own decisions for its future must have the opportunity to weigh in at the grassroots level about what it truly needs. A mentor of mine once said, ask for what you truly need. That will guide you. And so it's important for us each to be asked that. So I'm going to ask you that right now. What do you truly need for repair? And that can be very different for each person. And it might even change for you over time. But it's your right to get to actually answer that question. And maybe no one has ever asked you that question. So we are asking you that question now. And I'm just going to pause because you need a chance to think about that for a second and let that sink in. Because if you've not had a chance to grapple with that, then you have a chance now to actually try to consider that. What is it that you truly need for repair or would want to help you repair? We'll just pause a minute.
okay. This is the mostly JA audience, so I know nobody wants to go first. So whoever wants to be second. Okay. Can someone give her a mic?
Okay, I don't even exactly know how to state it, but I'm going to try. So, you know, with all the healing work that I've tried to do with a lot of people, it really turned out that, okay, I need to heal myself, right? It's like there's a self-reflection that is really important to do, because you can only help heal as well as you are able to heal, right? It needs to come from a place of being centered and grounded. And so one of the things that I have found pretty consistent across many, many different races or immigrants to this country is the notion of self-worth. And you know, what that means. And I don't know the answer, but I just think it might be something interesting to explore. And I was wondering if you had any thoughts on that. Like, how does a person who comes, even if you're third, fourth, fifth generation, how does a person come to this country and be solid in understanding who they are, what they're worth, and who they want to be going forward?
So this is a wisdom from the community that we're hoping for, because part of what you're talking about, Dana, is the self-reflection that you're talking about, the questions that you explore within yourself to build your sense of self and self-worth. But that would be the first step, actually, that whichever, you know, it doesn't have to be this bimodal kind of thing. There's the good guys and the bad guys, the yes guys and the no guys. But if the fracture is around this historical piece about who was loyal and who wasn't, who was right and who was wrong, who was bad and who was good, it has to start with those people who have a shared belief about what they have been holding tight to, is to be together to reflect on how they got to that place. See, so when we tried to push for this resolution to get the JACL to apologize, I think we took the wrong tact. You know, we used this organizational process. We're going to propose a resolution that the JACL apologize to the renunciants and the no-nos. And the JACL is going to defend their position and amend any of the specific elements of that proposal. And the way you win the resolution is how many people voted for one or the other. It's not a human process, it's an organizational process. There is no healing in that. Because we didn't sit with each other and reflect on, how did I get to be a no-no? What is it about that I'm demanding that someone apologize to me? And is the apology the answer? Do I feel better when someone apologizes to me? It's different for each of us. But I know when I got my $20,000, that apology meant more to me and to my mother than the 20 grand. But to other people, the apology didn't mean anything. The material compensation helped them feel better. But this process starts with, I think, JACL folks or people who have believed that there were traitors amongst us or felt that saying no was disloyal, need to get together and find out what is it that makes up that position. And those of us who have felt dominated by the decisions that the JACL made, labeled because the JACL led that effort to stigmatize us, how did I come to that? And how has it served me? So I think we start there. And if that isn't what you intended, that's what I did intend. Thanks, Dana.
So I'm not alone. And the other part of it is it gets further complicated, I think, because of our culture. Because some of it was brought from Japan, and then we brought it here and tried to interpret it into American setting, which didn't always mix well, right? So I think, you know, anyways, it's confusing, and I thought I would bring that forward. And it's always easier to look out than to look inside. You know, it's like we can look for organizations to try to, oh, well, what are you going to do? If you're going to do that, yeah, that makes sense, I'll do it too. But that's what we've been doing culturally, you know, even from Japan, right? And it's just a very tricky thing. Like, how do we get to not lose ourselves, but integrate in a healthy place of our own self-worth, of who we are here individually and then as a group as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Take the microphone away from him.
So I just want to say I've really been enjoying this conference. I don't know anything about the JCL. It's a whole new term to me. But one of the things I like to talk about, you mentioned, was shame. So from an African-American perspective, one of the biggest shames I've always had and still have is that I can't trace back. In other words, when I was in school and we would have different ethnic conversations, Native American, Puerto Ricans, everyone was able to go back far, 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 but yet my story starts at the shores of the Atlantic, and I can't speak about it anymore. So it's a shame that I have. Even I could be at this conference, even though I'm seeing everything you're talking about of Japanese American incarceration. One of the beautiful stories that you still have is you're showing pictures of family members. You're talking back about your story. So what advice you give to a person when it comes to how to break down that personal shame just to start the repairing process?
Okay, so it's my turn to ask questions, not your turn.
Sorry.
No. But this is the question, these are the kinds of questions you ask when you are with your group saying,
Yes.
how did I get shame? How did I get angry about this? And why am I so defended in this position? So that's the first step, these kinds of questions that people ask each other, not to try and convince the other group to agree with them, but to explore deeply what has kept me in this place? What do I need? Yeah. And I'll answer that question when we have lunch next week.
Well, because I know you a little bit now, right? Do you mind if I talk about our conversations?
Okay.
I'll be gentle. I'll be gentle. You know, I mean, one thing I will say is none of us have control over the circumstances that we were born into. And so we have to grieve that, right? What we can't change. And that's what I meant by around the fractures of this community, we keep looking in the rearview mirror and wanting something different. It's like, it's not going to change. It's done. And so what we can do now is grieve, to heal this deep sense of despair and loss for lost opportunities or disappointments or real suffering that took place, real harms that took place. So, you know, and I can only imagine, I actually can't imagine, frankly, what you experienced there, right? But I just know from my own experience is that the grieving work is continual and always underestimated. And then just because I know you're such an ally to people, and I am a member of this group, the GLBTQ community, there's an intentionality that we have had to adopt out of necessity because of the viciousness of the oppression, which is your chosen family. That you focus in this moment, in the present, on the people and the relationships around you who nourish you and help you find your deep humanity and connection to other people and open the future for yourself and others. And that is what you do, because I know you well enough now to do that, right, to understand that. But I think that's the same answer that we're trying to figure out around how do you heal a deep fracture. So.
Thank you.
Who else wants to respond? What repair would be useful for you? What do you need? What do you truly need?
I think for me, thanks to this discussion, I'm starting to wonder, because my grandfather was a member of the Heart Mountain Fair Play Committee, and he felt very, very ostracized his whole life, that for me, it's so intertwined. Loving him and being loyal to him is experiencing rage on his behalf. because of what he went through, he never raged on his own behalf, and so it's up to me to do that for him. And I just never thought of it that way before, that it was actually a way that I was expressing my love for him, to be so angry. And as some people here know, the JACL did apologize to the Heart Mountain resistors in 2000. It was the thing that allowed me to feel comfortable joining the JACL. And so when I learned that the organization was contemplating the long overdue apology to Tule Lake, I just jumped on that bandwagon because it felt like a vehicle for continuing to love and honor my grandfather. So I'm just wondering if it's time to start separating those two. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you. It's probably that love. See, this is part of the uncovering that we're doing right now. It's probably that love for the person in your family that had the direct experience, that somehow there's this automatic or relational responsibility. And in some ways, it has served us as a community to be outraged, to demand redress and reparations. But to repair within our own community, we have to figure out what are we going to do with that obligation? Do we hold on to it so that we pass it on to then our children and our grandchildren? Yeah, so that will be an important part of that conversation, yes.
Can I just add something there, which is, I think you hit upon something that comes up for a lot of us Yonsei, which is a lot of us feel a deep obligation to, what is it? It's more than acknowledgement. We feel responsible for the suffering of our ancestors that came before us. And so we're supposed to feel the rage, the pain, the grief, the loss. And if you grew up in the resettlement period, you grew up with survivors. So that's me. And I said to my dear friend who is also Yonsei, I said, but younger Yonsei than me, I said, you know, Grandma was fun and Grandpa was fun for you. Grandma and Grandpa were my parents and they were not always fun. Because they had just gotten out of camp. And they were terrified and they were really beat up by that experience. And they raised me. And they were trying to make sure that we survived. And so they were not fun. They were fun for you on the weekends, but they were not fun for me, right? And they loved me deeply, and they gave me a lot of amazing survival skills. But there's this generational thing, and I think for Gosei it's different too, because some of them didn't grow up as in close proximity, and yet they still have these feelings, and they don't know where they come from. It would be interesting to hear from other folks in the room who carry that, and please share, because I think this is a learning moment, but I just want to sort of mention that.
Okay. Yeah, hi. I'm John Funabiki. I'm way here in the back. Thank you very much to both of you. I guess two of the themes here that I've been hearing yesterday and today has been about truth-seeking and healing. And I'm really glad that those have come together during these discussions. And I really appreciate the question from the gentleman who said, I've never heard about the JACL, so this is really kind of irrelevant to me. So I'm a sansei, a very old sansei. And you know, I've been on this journey to try to figure out what happened to my parents and what did they really think about it. How did it affect their lives and the lives of my uncles and aunts, and then how did that affect us all? And trying to react to your question, I've been thinking about it for several minutes now. You know, what do I need to repair? And I've actually come to, I guess today I don't give a hoot if the JACL and
Keep
the,
speaking up, because I want to hear every
yeah,
word you say.
I'm not sure if today it matters a great deal to me if we can resolve this long-standing fissure, which was not our fault, right? Which was not the fault of those who were decided to join the 442 and those who decided to resist the draft. My parents were at Heart Mountain, okay? So the heart of that fissure. For me, as a sansei who now has a gosei granddaughter, who uses they, them pronouns, whose dream is to be able to be a dancer, and has just completed her college education. She had a great experience. She's a very talented dancer, and was invited to go to a Young Choreographers Festival in New York City. It was chosen from many, many young dancers and choreographers from across the country, and was appalled to find out when she got there. She had a great experience, but she was appalled when she got there to find that she was one of only 2, maybe 3 Asians. There were perhaps a handful of black dancers, and all the rest were white. And this was kind of a slap in the face to her, to understanding that bias and racial discrimination still exist in every world, including the dance world, right? And so if you ask me what would it take to make me feel that I've been healed, it would be to have to know that in the future, my granddaughter would not face those kinds of biases and discrimination and segregation in the future, and that other people of color and other gay and lesbian dancers, et cetera, so that for me, it'd be, for me to feel healed, it would be to know that we are marching forward to a better world where these kinds of things won't happen again. So that is where I would put my effort. That's where I put my effort in the kind of work that I do. So that kind of changes the boundaries of your question, but I hope that's at least a response to it.
And I think that, I think that is a wish or a dream for all of us, ultimately. And when we work together, not as a divided community or a splintered community, we're more likely to have a strong enough voice to move that forward. It's not going to happen in 1 or 2 generations, I don't think. But I think when we're not dealing with historical fissures that were imposed upon us by the government because it led to our incarceration. And I think part of it is to move beyond our survival strategies, that is to defend and protect the stances that our parents may have taken at that time. That when we are together, and it doesn't mean complete harmony, it doesn't mean that we never have a conflict again, but this long-standing one is really weakening our voices out in the world. And that when we can repair this and move towards having a consolidated voice, a voice that's not necessarily just a singular voice, but a shared voice, then I think the possibility of your hope for your granddaughter and great-granddaughter is more possible. Yeah.
Do you see this lessons of the repair that you're trying to, the healing that you want to promote within our community? Do you, sorry, in using the principles of the healing in our own community, do you see a way to apply that to the larger community, the country, basically? Is there a way to help bring the racism in this country to understand, all these other races, to not feel so fearful of each other? Is there a way that you see that we can bring this to the larger picture?
I would hope so, but let's do the work we need to do here first. I really feel like we can be a more powerful force in that mission if we figure out how we did our repair because of our own trauma, our own specific trauma. So I think we should talk about the next steps. So what is emerging here is the importance for us to do our own self-reflection. What am I holding on to? Who am I protecting? What survival strategies that are outdated and don't have meaning today have I been holding on to? And to be in, with cohorts or people who have that shared experience. It doesn't have to be there's a JCL group and there's a Tule Lake group. It might look like that, but if we said, okay, you guys go over on this side and talk to each other, do some self-reflection, and find out what is it you need? What is it you need that will help you feel like you can let go of these old defensive strategies? And the same for this group, whatever label we give that to. And then the next step, of course, is to get people then to talk to each other. And maybe it's going to be, there'll be representatives from this group that have processed enough, talked through, and willing to listen with empathy to each other. Then we bring those folks together. We don't get to what is the solution? An apology? Maybe that will come out of it, but that would be a secondary outcome. The primary outcome is we listen to each other with care and compassion and empathy, not as a defended, frozen stance about who is going to take responsibility and who is going to be the one that is finally labeled historically wrong and the other one right. So are you starting to see what we're planning for this group as we move forward? Go ahead, Mike.
Another idea to think about here is that asking for forgiveness in a process is complicated. And it works for some people and it doesn't work for everybody. But what we can ask for instead is reconciliation. And that doesn't mean you have to agree with each other. It means that you've come to understand why that person got to that place. And you don't even have to agree with it, but understanding actually in that context requires that you have to see the person. And so what happens in fractures a lot of times is we stop seeing each other as people. We don't see each other as humans anymore. We see them as opponents or people that I'm in conflict with and who are a threat to me. And so how do we move away from this image of the threat of this person, and then come back into relationship and community with each other? And that's not easy work, but it's very doable, actually. And in the process that Satsuki's describing, it means we're reaching for each other. We're making a conscious decision to reach for each other, no matter what. So a friend of mine, she is a Korean African-American organizer from Los Angeles, born and raised in Little Korea. and lived through the riots there that happened. And also she's a Movement for Black Lives organizer. And, you know, if you're familiar with the Movement for Black Lives, you know, there was this incredible support and surge around ending racism targeting black folks. And there was a lot of support that went in there from everyone. And then almost overnight, after, you know, the summer of protests, all that support fell away. And what happened was the movement really struggled. And they went through a crisis, and a lot of the leaders were attacked, and a lot of hard things happened. And she shared with me in a group that what they figured out, they were standing in the ashes, and they were trying to figure out, how do we go forward from here? And what they figured out, and this is their version, we'll have to find ours, and it may look or not look like this, but they decided they were gonna form pods. And I said, pods, that's an interesting word. She said, yeah, for instance, a group of 6 or less people. And so this kind of correlates to what you were suggesting. And I said, well, what did you do in those groups? She said, we made a conscious decision to be in the group with each other. And no one could give your consent for you. You had to give your own consent. No one could speak for you. And once you were making a decision to be in that group, then you had to make a commitment to that group to actually understand and know the people. And they set up these pods that went for several, they're still going, since 2022. And I said, well, who was in these pods? And she said, not always people that I liked, but they were people that I knew I needed relationships with to move our community, her community forward. And I said, so what happened? And she said, well, now I'm helping to raise some of their children. And when the fires burned down LA, she said, our community knew how to respond because we had repaired enough of our trust with each other that we could move rapidly together. And she said, so wherever we had these pods, the communities did okay in the fires, and we're supporting each other and we're moving through it together. And she said, that's the learning of repair work in community. I think we have to wrap it up.
So we have to wrap up, but I want to put this conference in perspective, because this gathering was so important for us to be together, because we have to start by telling the truth. And the effort the organizers had in mind was to start sharing and talking about the experiences. What happened? What actually happened? Stories that were suppressed, and perspectives that had frozen in place. And the idea of changing perspectives is about movement forward towards repair and healing. We also know that whatever we're suggesting here in our conversation, hope that it will plant a seed for people who are here today to push forward ideas about who should be the holding place for this next step. Is it the next conference we have here? Is it something that is going to happen in a more disparate way? So we invite you to have suggestions, to have ideas and thoughts about how we move forward in this healing. And our hope here was to inspire the possibility of real repair. Not going back to this organizational, let the organization prove themselves or do certain things so that the other group can feel better. It's not human enough. It's not personal enough. You know, Mike and I with Sudo for Solidarity are willing to support and encourage and facilitate. It may not be us that is the most neutral place to sponsor this next step in the movement, but maybe it is, I don't know. But I think this is a beginning, and I think it's been great to be with my second best friend.
Thanks.
And to be with you today and to watch the dynamics and the wonderful speakers that have been here. And
Truly.
yeah, and my love and appreciation to Chizu. Yeah.
Thank you.